I walked into my childhood home and saw my life's work hanging on the living room wall like a trophy they'd created themselves. My name is Daria, and I'm 29 years old. I paint abstract art that most people don't understand, live in a studio apartment that smells like turpentine, and until 2 weeks ago, I thought I was finally about to prove everyone wrong about my little hobby. The painting staring back at me was called Threshold. 3 years of my soul poured onto canvas in deep blues and intense reds, with gold threads that caught light like hope breaking through darkness. I'd painted it during the most challenging period of my life, when I was broke, heartbroken, and questioning everything. It was supposed to be hanging in some collector's penthouse right now, not in my mother's perfectly beige living room between her fake ferns and family photos, where I'm always slightly out of focus. Daria, you're here! Mom's voice rang out from the kitchen, that particular tone she uses when she's about to perform motherhood for an audience. David's already here with Nicole. We're so excited to hear about your little art sale. Little art sale. $70,000, and she called it little. I forced my feet to move toward the kitchen, but my eyes stayed locked on the painting. Every brushstroke was mine. Every crack in the paint where I'd worked too fast, too desperate to capture the feeling before it disappeared. This wasn't a print or a reproduction. This was the original. The original that was supposed to be in Braxton Underwood's private collection by now. There she is! David's voice boomed as I entered the kitchen. My older brother stood by the island, all 6'2" of him radiating that surgeon confidence that made nurses swoon and mothers beam with pride. His fiancée, Nicole, clung to his arm like a designer accessory, her engagement ring catching the overhead lights. Daria, congratulations on your sale, Nicole said, her voice sweet as artificial vanilla. David told me all about it. 70,000. That's amazing for a first big sale. Not my first big sale, my biggest sale. But I smiled anyway. Thanks. It feels surreal, honestly. I bet it does, David said, ruffling my hair like I was still 12. Our little artist, making real money finally. Mom bustled around us, pulling dishes from the oven. I made your favorite, Daria, chicken parmesan. Though I know you're probably eating nothing but ramen noodles in that tiny apartment. Actually, I've been eating pretty well lately. I kept my voice light, casual. The gallery advance helped a lot. Gallery advance? Dad appeared in the doorway, quiet as always. He gave me a small smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes anymore. Anne gave me some money up front when the buyer confirmed the purchase. Standard practice. How wonderful, Mom said, not looking up from her serving spoons. David, tell Daria about the wedding venue. Nicole found the most gorgeous place. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from me and back to David. It always did. David the surgeon, David the success story. David who bought Mom a new car for her birthday, while I painted her a portrait she hung in the guest bathroom. The Riverside Manor, Nicole gushed. It's perfect. The ceremony will be by the water, and the reception hall has these incredible floor-to-ceiling windows. The deposit alone was $15,000, but it's going to be magical. $15,000. I thought about my painting again, hanging in the living room like it belonged there. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. Well, we've been saving, David said, and Mom and Dad helped out with some of the bigger costs. We're happy to do it, Mom said, finally looking at me. It's not every day your son gets married. Some things are worth the investment. Some things. Not my art, apparently, but David's wedding was worth investing in. Can I see the painting again? I asked suddenly. I mean, I know it's weird, but I haven't seen it displayed anywhere except my studio. Of course, honey, Dad said. We're proud to have it. We walked back to the living room, and I stood in front of my work again. Nicole came up beside me. It's so beautiful, she said. When your mom showed it to us, I just fell in love. The colors are so rich, and there's something about it that makes you feel, I don't know, hopeful? When did Mom show it to you? A few weeks ago. Right after we heard about your sale, actually. She said she wanted us to see what real talent looked like. My stomach dropped. A few weeks ago, this painting should have been crated and shipped to its new owner. I'm glad you like it, I managed. David joined us, wrapping an arm around Nicole's shoulders. We were thinking of commissioning you for something for our new house. Something that goes with our decor, you know? More neutral tones. I nodded, still staring at my painting. At the signature in the bottom right corner that looked exactly like mine because it was mine. That sounds great, I said. But inside, something cold and sharp was taking shape. Something that felt a lot like the moment before I'd started painting Threshold 3 years ago. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't demand explanations. I smiled and complimented Nicole's engagement ring and listened to David talk about his latest surgery and helped Mom clear the dishes like the good daughter I'd always tried to be. But as I drove home that night, past the gallery where my painting should have been sold, past the coffee shop where I'd celebrated with Anne just 2 weeks ago, I made myself a promise. They thought they knew me, thought I was the dreamer, the pushover, the one who'd always bend rather than break. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my painting hanging on their wall like some kind of sick joke. By 6 a.m. I was back in my car, driving to their house with a thermos of coffee and a plan to get answers. Mom was in her garden when I pulled up, deadheading roses in her perfectly pressed gardening outfit that probably cost more than my rent. "Daria, what are you doing here so early?" "I brought coffee," I said, holding up the thermos. "Thought we could talk." She straightened up, brushing dirt off her gloves. "About what?" "The painting." Her face didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "What about it?" "Mom, that's the original, the one that sold, the one that should be with its buyer right now." She laughed, actually laughed. "Don't be ridiculous, Daria. It's just a painting." "Just a painting?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "That painting sold for $70,000. And you got your money, didn't you?" She pulled off her gloves, not meeting my eyes. "I don't see what the problem is." "The problem is that you have the original and some collector thinks he has it too. You're being dramatic. It's a copy." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken the night before. "See this brushstroke here? And this crack in the paint? Those are from when I was working on it. You can't copy imperfections like that, Mom." She glanced at the phone, then back at her roses. "I'm sure you're mistaken." "I'm not mistaken. I painted it. I know every inch of that canvas." "Daria, honey, you overvalue your little hobbies." "It's sweet, but—" "Hobbies?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "This is my career. My livelihood." "Is it, though?" She finally looked at me directly. "Because last I checked, you were still asking your father for help with rent 3 months ago." The coffee in my hands suddenly felt too hot. "That was before the sale." "One sale doesn't make a career, sweetheart. David didn't become a surgeon after one successful operation. This isn't about David." "Everything is about family, Daria. That's what you've never understood. We do things for each other. We support each other." "By stealing from each other?" Her mouth tightened. "No one stole anything. We needed a contribution for David's wedding, and you had that painting just sitting in your studio collecting dust." "It wasn't collecting dust. It was sold. To a buyer, who paid $70,000 for it. And the family needed that money more than some stranger did." I stared at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd driven me to art classes when I was 8, who'd once told me I had a gift. "You forged my signature." "I did no such thing." "Then how did you get the painting from the gallery?" She turned back to her roses, snipping stems with more force than necessary. "I think you should go home, Daria. You're upset and not thinking clearly." "Mom, look at me." She didn't. "Look at me and tell me you didn't take my painting." The back door opened and David stepped out, still in his pajamas, hair messy from sleep. "What's going on?" I could hear voices from upstairs. "Your sister is having some kind of breakdown." Mom said without turning around. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm trying to figure out why my sold painting is hanging in your living room. David rubbed his eyes. Daria, come on. It's 7 in the morning. Answer the question, David. He looked between me and Mom, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance. Nicole loved the painting, he said finally. We didn't think you'd mind if we kept it in the family. You didn't think I'd mind? My voice was getting louder, but I couldn't stop it. You didn't think I'd mind that you stole $70,000 from me? We didn't steal anything, David said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used with difficult patience. We're family. What's yours is ours, right? That's not how it works, isn't it? Mom turned around now, her face hard. Who paid for your art classes? Who bought your supplies when you were starting out? Who let you live here rent-free until you were 25? That doesn't give you the right to... It gives us the right to expect some gratitude, she cut me off. Some consideration for the family that supported your dreams when no one else would. David nodded. We've always been there for you, Daria. This is just you being there for us. I looked at them both, these people who'd raised me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Mom with her perfectly styled hair and her garden gloves. David in his expensive pajamas, probably worth more than most people's weekly salary. How did you get it from the gallery? Does it matter? Mom asked. It matters to me, David sighed. Anne called to confirm the pickup details. Mom went instead of the buyer's representative. Simple mix-up. Mix-up. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. And Anne just handed over a $70,000 painting to the wrong person? Anne knows our family, Mom said. She's known you since you were a teenager. She trusted us. She trusted you to deliver it to the buyer. And we will, David said quickly. Eventually. After the wedding. After the wedding that my painting is paying for. It's a loan, Mom said. We'll figure it out. I stood there in their perfect backyard, with their perfect roses and their perfect justifications, and felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for years. Something harder. Something that had been holding me back. You're right, I said finally. They both looked surprised. We are family, and family should support each other. I smiled, and it felt strange on my face. I'm going to support you both so much. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving them standing in the garden looking confused. As I drove away, I pulled out my phone and called Anne. Daria, it's early. Is everything okay? Anne, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. When my mother picked up the painting, did she show you any authorization from Braxton? Silence on the other end. Anne? Daria, I think we need to talk. Anne's gallery smelled like fresh paint and expensive coffee. She was waiting for me by the front desk, her usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. I should have called you immediately, she said before I even sat down. Your mother showed up with a letter of authorization. It looked official, had your signature, everything. Can I see it? She pulled out a folder and handed me a piece of letterhead. My stomach dropped. It was my signature, perfectly forged, authorizing Karen Murray to collect the painting on behalf of the buyer. This isn't my handwriting, I said. I know that now. But Daria, your mother has been to every one of your shows. She's picked up pieces for you before. I had no reason to doubt. It's okay, Anne. This isn't your fault. She ran her hands through her silver hair. It absolutely is my fault. I've been in this business for 20 years. I should have verified with you directly. What did she say when she picked it up? That Braxton had changed his mind about the delivery date. Wanted it earlier for some event he was hosting. She seemed to know details about the sale that only someone close to you would know. Like what? The price, obviously, but also that you'd painted it during a difficult period. That it represented a breakthrough for you artistically. Anne's voice got quieter. She said she was proud of you. I laughed, but it came out bitter. She said that? She seemed genuinely emotional about it. I thought it was sweet, actually. A mother supporting her daughter's career. By stealing from it. Anne leaned forward. Daria, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Is there any chance this was a misunderstanding? Maybe your family needed the money for something urgent and planned to explain later? I showed her the photos I'd taken of the painting in their living room. Does this look urgent to you? Her face hardened as she scrolled through the images. That's definitely the original. I can see the texture, the brushwork. She looked up at me. What do you want to do? What are my options? Legally? Several. The sale contract specifies delivery to Braxton within 10 days of payment. We're past that deadline. There's also the forgery issue. That's fraud, potentially criminal. What about Braxton? Does he know? Not yet. He's been traveling, but he's expecting delivery confirmation by the end of the week. I thought about David's wedding, 3 weeks away. About Nicole's dress and the $15,000 venue deposit. I want to meet him. Braxton? Why? Because he's the victim here too. He paid for something he doesn't have. Anne nodded slowly. I can arrange that. But Daria, once we involve him, this becomes much bigger. He's not just a collector, he's a serious investor. He has lawyers. Good. Maybe it's time my family met some lawyers. She made the call while I sat there, staring at the forged authorization. The signature was perfect. Too perfect. Someone had practiced. He can meet us this afternoon, Anne said, hanging up. His office downtown. What should I bring? Everything. The photos, this letter, any documentation of the original sale. And Daria? She paused. Be prepared for him to be angry, very angry. Braxton's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. The man himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Ms. Daria, he said, shaking my hand. I've been looking forward to seeing the piece in person. About that, Anne began, but I cut her off. Mr. Braxton, my family stole your painting. He blinked. I'm sorry? I laid out the whole story. The dinner, the painting on the wall, the forged authorization. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. So let me understand this, he said finally. I paid $70,000 for a painting that is currently hanging in your parents' living room, and they used my money to pay for your brother's wedding. That's correct. He turned to Anne. How is this possible? I made an error in judgment. I trusted someone I shouldn't have. An error in judgment. He repeated the words like they tasted bad. Do you have any idea what this does to your gallery's reputation? To mine? I understand you're upset. Anne started. Upset? He stood up, pacing to the window. I have colleagues who know about this purchase. I've already mentioned it to other collectors. If word gets out that I bought a stolen painting... It's not stolen, I said quickly. It's mine. I painted it. He turned back to me. But you sold it to me. I did, and you should have it. But my family intercepted it. Your family committed fraud. Yes. He sat back down, studying my face. What do you want from me? I want to make this right. I want you to get your painting, and I want my family to face consequences for what they did. What kind of consequences? I thought about David's smug smile, about Mom's dismissive laugh, about years of being treated like my dreams didn't matter. The kind that makes sure they never underestimate me again. Braxton leaned back in his chair. Tell me more. The wedding is in 3 weeks. They've spent your money on deposits, flowers, catering. If we wait until the day before to expose this, they'll have to choose between canceling everything or finding $70,000 in 24 hours. That's vindictive. They stole from both of us. From you, from me, from everyone who believes art has value. He was quiet for a long moment. What about the legal issues? I have an idea about that too, I said, but I'll need your help. Anne looked between us. Daria, what are you planning? I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo I'd taken that morning, a blank canvas I'd set up in my studio. I'm going to paint them a wedding present they'll never forget. Braxton smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. I'm listening. But first, I need to know something. The contract I signed with Anne, does it have any clauses about authenticity? About what happens if the piece is misrepresented or fraudulently transferred? Anne nodded. Standard authenticity guarantees. If the provenance is compromised, the sale is void. Meaning? Meaning the painting legally reverts to you, and Braxton gets his money back from the gallery. But the gallery doesn't have the money anymore, I said. No, we don't. Braxton's smile widened. But your family does. I looked at both of them, these two people who barely knew me but were about to help me reclaim everything that had been taken. So, we're really doing this? We're really doing this, Braxton said. Anne sighed. God help us all. I spent the next 3 days playing the perfect daughter. I called Mom to ask about wedding details. I texted David congratulations on his latest surgery. I even offered to help Nicole with centerpieces. But every night I was in my studio painting and planning. The breakthrough came when I was going through Dad's old filing cabinet, looking for my birth certificate for some fake paperwork I was preparing. Tucked behind insurance documents, I found a manila folder labeled Daria, Art Sales. Inside was a photocopy of a certificate of authenticity for Threshold, dated 2 weeks after the sale. It had Braxton's name on it, my forged signature, and Anne's gallery seal. They hadn't just stolen the painting. They'd created fake documentation to cover their tracks. I photographed everything and texted Anne immediately. Emergency meeting, now. An hour later, we were back in Braxton's office. He studied the fake certificate with the intensity of a surgeon examining an X-ray. This is sophisticated, he said. Someone put real thought into this. My mother used to work in insurance, I said. She knows how to make paperwork look official. Anne was pacing. This changes everything. They didn't just intercept the painting. They created false provenance documents. That's serious fraud. How serious? I asked. Federal charges serious. Art fraud is a felony. Braxton set down the papers. I have to ask, do you really want to destroy your family over this? I thought about the question, about Christmases where David got the expensive gifts while I got art supplies from the dollar store, about graduation parties where my art school acceptance was mentioned in passing while David's medical school admission was celebrated for hours, about years of being told my dreams were hobbies while his were investments. They destroyed themselves, I said. I'm just documenting it. Fair enough. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. Wait, I said. Not yet. Why not? Because I want Nicole to know what she married into. Anne raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Nicole thinks she's marrying into a respectable family. She has no idea her wedding is being funded by art fraud. I want to give her a chance to make an informed decision. That's generous of you, Braxton said. It's strategic. If she backs out, David's humiliation is complete. If she doesn't, she becomes complicit. I called Nicole that afternoon, suggesting we meet for drinks to celebrate her upcoming wedding. She suggested a wine bar near her apartment, the kind of place where everything cost $30 and came with a story about the vineyard. She was already there when I arrived, glowing with that pre-wedding happiness that made her look younger than 30. Daria, I'm so glad you called. I've been wanting some sister time. Sister time. We'd known each other for 2 years and had maybe 5 real conversations. I brought a celebration gift, I said, pulling out a bottle of expensive red wine. For your new life. You didn't have to do that. She hugged me, smelling like designer perfume and happiness. We ordered appetizers, and I let her talk about wedding plans while I poured generous glasses of wine. By the third glass, she was relaxed and chatty. "Can I tell you a secret?" she said, leaning closer. "Of course. I was so worried about the money. The wedding, I mean. David's still paying off medical school loans, and my job at the marketing firm doesn't pay that much. When your mom said she had it handled, I almost cried with relief." Mom said she had it handled? The whole thing. The venue deposit, the catering, everything. She said it was her gift to David. But between you and me, I think it came from your painting sale. My hand tightened on my wine glass. What do you mean? Well, the timing was perfect, right? Your big sale, then suddenly your parents can afford to pay for everything. She giggled. Your mom even joked about it being a family contribution. She joked about it? She said something like, well, Daria's art is finally paying for something useful. Nicole's face fell as she realized what she'd said. Oh, God, that came out wrong. I didn't mean... It's okay, I said, forcing a smile. What else did she say? Nothing really. Just that the money would be handled before the wedding. The gallery stuff, whatever that meant. She took another sip of wine. I didn't ask too many questions. I was just grateful. The gallery stuff? I don't know. Something about paperwork and transfers. Your mom said she'd take care of it so you didn't have to worry about the business side. I nodded, pouring her another glass. That sounds like Mom. She's amazing, so organized. David says she could have run a corporation if she'd wanted to. She's definitely good at managing things. And she's so proud of you. She showed me pictures of all your paintings. She said you get your talent from her side of the family. Did she show you Threshold? The one that sold? The blue and red one? It's gorgeous. She has it hanging in the living room now. I told her she should get it professionally framed. Something that expensive deserves museum-quality presentation. She told you how much it sold for? 70,000? Can you believe it? I've never seen that much money in my life. She laughed. Well, except for David's student loans, but that's money going out, not coming in. I sat back, watching her drink my wine and celebrate her wedding that was being funded by my stolen painting. She wasn't evil, just willfully ignorant. The kind of person who didn't ask uncomfortable questions as long as she got what she wanted. Nicole, can I ask you something? Anything. If you found out something bad about David's family, something that could hurt people, would you want to know? She blinked, suddenly more focused. What kind of bad thing? Hypothetically. I don't know. I mean, every family has secrets, right? As long as it doesn't affect our marriage? What if it was illegal? Her face went pale. Daria, you're scaring me. Is there something I should know? I studied her face. This woman who was about to become my sister-in-law, who had just admitted she'd rather stay ignorant than face uncomfortable truths. No, I said finally. Nothing you need to worry about. She relaxed, finishing her wine. Good. I have enough wedding stress without family drama. I drove her home, listening to her chatter about flowers and seating charts. When I dropped her off, she hugged me again. Thank you for tonight, and for being so understanding about everything. I know this wedding is expensive, and I know your family is making sacrifices. We all make sacrifices for the people we love, I said. She smiled and waved as she walked to her building, completely oblivious to what was coming. I sat in my car for a moment, watching her disappear into her apartment building. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Braxton. She knows. She's complicit. Game on. His response came immediately. My lawyer is standing by. I drove home through the city lights, past galleries and coffee shops, and all the places where real artists struggled to make their work matter. Tomorrow, I would start painting again. But tonight, I had planning to do. The wedding was in 2 weeks. Time to get to work. The next morning, I called Braxton directly instead of going through Anne. I need to meet with you alone, I said. There's something I want to propose, but Anne might try to talk us out of it. Intriguing. My office in an hour? Actually, can you come to my studio? I want to show you something. He arrived in a black Tesla that probably cost more than I'd made in the last 3 years. I watched him take in my neighborhood, the converted warehouses, the graffiti, the artists hauling canvases down fire escapes. This is where you work? Third floor. Fair warning, it smells like paint and there's no elevator. He followed me up the narrow staircase, past musicians practicing and a sculptor welding something that looked like a metal dragon. My studio was at the end of the hall, a converted loft space with huge windows and canvases covering every wall. Jesus, he said, stopping in the doorway. How many paintings do you have? About 40 finished pieces, maybe 60 works in progress. I gestured around the room. This is my life's work. Everything I've created in the last 5 years. He walked slowly through the space, studying each canvas. These are incredible. Why aren't they in galleries? Because galleries want artists with connections, with family money, with names that look good on invitations. I pulled a canvas off an easel. This is what I've been working on since our meeting. The painting was dark, violent strokes of black and red with fragments of legal documents collaged into the composition. Words like fraud and forgery were visible through the paint layers. It's called inheritance, I said. It's about what families really pass down to each other. It's powerful, angry. I'm angry. He nodded, still studying the piece. What did you want to propose? I want to turn this into something bigger than just getting my painting back. I want to expose what they did publicly, artistically. How? I pulled out my phone and showed him photos I'd taken around the city. There are 3 empty gallery spaces available for rent this month. Pop-up exhibitions. I want to rent one for the weekend of David's wedding. An art show? A revenge exhibition. I'll create an entire series about family betrayal, art fraud, the devaluation of creative work. I'll document everything, the forged papers, the stolen painting, the fake certificates. Make it part of the art. Braxton was quiet for a long moment. That's ambitious. It's also expensive. Gallery rental, materials, promotion. I'd need about $15,000. $15,000, he smiled. The same amount as their wedding venue deposit? Exactly. And you want me to fund it? I want you to invest in it. These paintings will sell. Revenge art always sells, especially when there's a real story behind it. He walked over to another canvas, this one showing a family dinner table with empty frames where faces should be. What makes you think people will come? Because I'm going to invite everyone who's coming to the wedding. You're going to compete with your brother's wedding? I'm going to give people a choice. They can go celebrate a marriage built on fraud, or they can come see the truth displayed in oil and canvas. Braxton laughed, actually laughed. You're diabolical. I'm an artist. We're supposed to reveal uncomfortable truths. What about Anne? She's not going to like this. Anne will understand once she sees the work. She's been in this business long enough to know that sometimes art has to be dangerous. He pulled out his phone. I need to make a call. I waited while he spoke to someone in hushed tones, probably his lawyer or accountant. When he hung up, he was smiling. I'll fund the exhibition on one condition. What? I want to buy the entire series. Whatever you create for this show, I want exclusive purchase rights. All of it? All of it, at fair market value, determined by an independent appraiser. I stared at him. Why? Because what your family did to you, they did to me too. They made us both victims. But you're turning it into something powerful, something that matters. I want to be part of that. And if the paintings don't sell, they'll sell. Trust me, revenge art with a real story behind it? Collectors will fight over these pieces. I walked to my easel and picked up a brush, testing the weight of it in my hand. There's something else, something I haven't told you. What? My ex-boyfriend Caden is a photographer. He's been documenting street art and gallery openings for years. He has connections with local media, art bloggers, social media influencers. You want to turn this into a media event. I want to turn this into the story of the year. Local artist exposes family art fraud through revenge exhibition. It writes itself. Braxton nodded slowly. When do we start? We already have. I called the gallery space this morning. It's available the entire weekend of the wedding, Friday through Sunday. And Caden? I texted him an hour ago. He's coming over tonight to see the work. You were pretty confident I'd say yes. I dipped my brush in red paint and made a bold stroke across a fresh canvas. You're not just buying art, Braxton. You're buying justice. And justice is always a good investment. He watched me paint for a moment. What about your family, when they find out? They'll find out when everyone else does, at the opening reception. Which is when? I smiled, adding another stroke of red. Friday night, 6 p.m., 2 hours before David's rehearsal dinner. You're going to destroy them. No, I said, stepping back to examine my work. I'm going to reveal them. There's a difference. Braxton pulled out his checkbook. 15,000, you said? To start. I might need more for materials, promotion, catering for the opening. Whatever you need. He wrote the check and handed it to me. I have one request. What's that? I want to be there when they see it, when they realize what you've done. I took the check looking at all those zeros. More money than I'd ever held in my hands, given to me by someone who believed in my work. You'll have a front row seat, I said. I promise. After he left, I called Caden. Daria, I got your text. What's this about a new series? Can you come over tonight? Bring your camera. I have a story to tell you. What kind of story? I looked around my studio, at all the blank canvases waiting to be filled with truth and rage and justice. The kind that changes everything. Caden arrived at 8 p.m. with his camera bag and a bottle of cheap wine, the same brand we used to drink when we were dating and broke. Okay, I'm here, he said, looking around the studio. What's this emergency art project that couldn't wait until... Holy shit. He'd spotted the inheritance painting, the one with the legal documents embedded in the paint. Is that a real court document? It's a photocopy of the forged authorization my mother used to steal my painting. Your mother stole your painting? I told him everything while he photographed each canvas, his expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, he set down his camera and opened the wine. Your family is insane. My family is about to be exposed. Daria, this is huge. Like, career-making huge. But are you sure you want to go nuclear? They went nuclear first. I'm just responding with equal force. He poured wine into 2 paint-stained mugs. Tell me about the exhibition. I showed him the gallery space I'd rented online. A converted warehouse in the arts district with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. It's called the Meridian Gallery. They specialize in emerging artists and controversial work. How many pieces are you planning? 12. 1 for each member of the wedding party, plus extras for the parents and Nicole. Jesus! That's a lot of work for 10 days. I've been painting nonstop since our meeting with Braxton. I have 6 finished and 3 more started. Caden walked over to a canvas I'd been working on that afternoon. It showed a dinner table with dollar bills scattered across the plates instead of food. This one's brutal. It's called Family Dinner. It's about how everything in my family has a price tag. And this one? He pointed to a painting of a wedding dress made entirely of shredded legal documents. Something borrowed. Nicole's wedding dress funded by fraud. He laughed despite himself. You're going to destroy them. I'm going to tell the truth. If that destroys them, that's their choice. What about the media angle? I pulled out my phone and showed him a list I'd been making. I want to contact the arts reporter at the city paper, the blogger who covers gallery openings, maybe that Instagram account that features local artists. I know all those people. I can make calls. Really? Daria, this is the kind of story that makes careers, mine included. A revenge exhibition exposing art fraud? With real legal documents and a family wedding as the backdrop. This is going to be everywhere. What about the timing? The opening is Friday night, the wedding is Saturday. Perfect. Friday night gives the story time to break on social media. By Saturday morning, everyone will know. I felt a flutter of nerves. What if no one comes? Are you kidding? Free wine, scandal, and original art? People will line up around the block. We spent the next hour planning the details. Caden would handle media outreach and document the creation process. I would finish the paintings and coordinate with the gallery. Braxton would provide additional funding if needed. What about invitations? Caden asked. I'm making my own. I showed him a design I'd sketched. A formal wedding invitation, but instead of David and Nicole's names, it featured my name and the exhibition title. Daria Murray cordially invites you to the opening of Inheritance, a Family Portrait, he read aloud. Friday, June 15th, 6 p.m. Meridian Gallery. Wine and revelations provided. I'm sending them to everyone on David's wedding guest list. How are you getting the addresses? Nicole showed me the invitation list when we were working on centerpieces. I took pictures. That's slightly terrifying. That's strategic. The next morning, I filed paperwork at the courthouse. Not a lawsuit, not yet, but a formal complaint about art fraud, with copies of all the forged documents. The clerk stamped everything with official seals and case numbers. This creates a public record, I explained to Anne when I called her. Anyone can look up the case and see the evidence. Daria, you're playing with fire. I'm playing with matches. They brought the gasoline. What if they try to return the painting before the exhibition? Then they admit guilt. Either way, I win. That afternoon, I went to a print shop and ordered 200 invitations on heavy cardstock. The owner, a woman in her 60s with paint under her fingernails, looked at the design and smiled. Family drama? The worst kind. Good for you, honey. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to see what's on the other side. I spent the evening addressing envelopes by hand, writing each name carefully. David's medical school friends, Nicole's sorority sisters, Mom's book club, Dad's golf buddies. Every single person who was supposed to celebrate their perfect wedding. The last invitation was addressed to my parents' house, but I wrote, the Murray family, instead of their individual names. On Thursday, I mailed them all. On Friday morning, my phone started ringing. Daria? It was my cousin Sarah, David's age, someone I saw maybe twice a year at family gatherings. I got your invitation. What's this about? It's an art exhibition. You should come. But it's the same night as David's rehearsal dinner. I know. Are you competing with your brother's wedding? I'm offering people a choice. She was quiet for a moment. Is everything okay with your family? Everything's about to be very clear with my family. Daria, what's going on? Come to the gallery tonight and find out. I hung up and immediately got another call, then another. By noon, I'd talked to 12 people, all asking the same questions, all getting the same answers. Anne called at 2 p.m. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. People are asking about your exhibition, about the paintings, about what Revelations means. Good. Controversy sells tickets. Daria, your mother called me. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She wanted to know if I knew anything about an art show you were planning. She sounded concerned. What did you tell her? I told her she should ask you directly. And? She said she'd tried calling you, but you weren't answering. I looked at my phone. 17 missed calls from Mom, 12 from David, 5 from Dad. I'd turned off the ringer hours ago. They know, I said. They know something, but they don't know what. They will tonight. At 5 p.m., I stood in the Meridian Gallery, surrounded by 12 paintings that told the story of my family's betrayal, in vivid, undeniable detail. Caden was setting up lighting while the gallery owner arranged wine glasses on a long table. You ready for this? He asked. I looked at my paintings, at the evidence mounted on the walls, at the crowd already gathering outside the windows. I've been ready my whole life. At 5:45, I unlocked the doors. The first person through was Braxton, dressed in a black suit like he was attending a funeral. "How do you feel?" he asked, like I'm about to find out who I really am. At exactly 6 p.m., the gallery was packed. I stood in front of my largest painting, a family portrait where everyone's faces were replaced with price tags, and raised my wine glass. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "Tonight, I want to tell you a story about family, art, and the price of truth." In the back of the room, I saw my parents push through the crowd, their faces pale with shock. "This is the story of how my family stole my art and sold my dreams to pay for a wedding." Mom's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the concrete floor. "And this," I said, gesturing to the walls around us, "is what theft looks like when you turn it into art." The gallery fell silent, except for the sound of Mom's broken wine glass crunching under someone's shoe. I could see her face from across the room, white as paper, mouth open in shock. "Daria, what is this?" Dad's voice cut through the silence. "This is my art, Dad. You always said I should make something of myself." David pushed through the crowd, Nicole clinging to his arm. She looked like she was going to be sick. "You can't do this," David said. "Not tonight. Not before our wedding." "Actually, I can. It's my art, my story, my choice." I gestured to the painting behind me. "This piece is called The Golden Child. It's about favoritism and the cost of being invisible." "Daria, stop this right now," Mom hissed, trying to keep her voice low. "You're embarrassing the family. I'm revealing the family." A woman with a notebook pushed forward, Jessica, the arts reporter from the city paper. Caden had come through. "Ms. Daria, can you explain the legal documents incorporated into these pieces?" "Those are photocopies of the forged authorization my mother used to steal my $70,000 painting from the gallery." I pointed to the inheritance painting. "She impersonated the buyer's representative and intercepted the sale." "That's not true," Mom said, but her voice cracked. "The case number is publicly available," I said. "Filed yesterday at the courthouse. Anyone can look it up." Jessica scribbled notes. "And the painting in question is currently hanging in my parents' living room, being used as decoration while they spend the buyer's money on my brother's wedding." The crowd murmured. I saw people pulling out phones, taking pictures, recording videos. "This is insane," David said. "You're destroying our family over a painting." "You destroyed our family when you stole from me. We didn't steal anything. We're family. What's yours is ours." "Really?" I walked over to another painting, a canvas covered in medical bills with David's name on them. "Then you won't mind if I take out loans in your name to fund my art career?" "After all, what's yours is mine, right? That's different." "How?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Nicole stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Daria, please. The wedding is tomorrow. Can't we work this out after?" "Nicole, did you know the money for your wedding came from art fraud?" I thought it was a family loan." "From who? My parents don't have $70,000 lying around." "I don't know. I didn't ask questions." "That's the problem. Nobody asked questions. You all just took what you wanted and assumed I'd be too weak to fight back." Braxton appeared beside me, holding a legal document. "Actually, there's more." The crowd pressed closer. "I'm Braxton, the buyer who was defrauded. My lawyers filed a civil suit this afternoon. The Murray family owes me $70,000 plus damages, interest, and legal fees." Dad's face went gray. "We don't have that kind of money." "Then you shouldn't have spent it," Braxton said calmly. "The wedding," Nicole whispered. "All the deposits, the venue, the catering, non-refundable," I said. I checked. David grabbed my arm. "Daria, you have to stop this. Call off your lawyer friend. We'll figure something out." I pulled away from him. "Let go of me. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other." "We raised you," Mom shouted. finally losing control. "We fed you, clothed you, paid for your art classes. You owe us." "I owe you nothing. You chose to have children. That was your responsibility, not my debt." Jessica stepped closer with her recorder. "Mrs. Murray, do you deny taking the painting from the gallery?" This is a family matter. Art fraud is a criminal matter," Braxton said. "The FBI handles cases involving forged documents and interstate commerce." "FBI?" Nicole's voice was barely a whisper. "The buyer lives in another state. That makes it federal jurisdiction." David looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. Colleagues from the hospital, friends from medical school, people who respected him. "You're destroying my career," he said to me. "Your career will survive. Your reputation might not." "Please," he said, and for the first time in my life, I heard my brother beg. "I'll do anything. We'll pay you back. You'll what? Get a loan? Sell your house? Ask Nicole's parents for money?" I shook my head. "You had $70,000. You spent it. That's your problem now." "The wedding is tomorrow," Nicole sobbed. 200 people are coming. My dress, the flowers, everything." "Should have thought of that before you decided to fund it with stolen money." An older man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. "David? What's going on here?" David's face went even paler. "Dr. Harrison, I didn't know you were—" "I got an invitation. Very interesting art show." He looked at the paintings, then back at David. "Is it true? Did you steal money to pay for your wedding?" "It's complicated." "It's really not," I said. "They stole my painting, forged documents, and committed fraud. The evidence is on the walls." Dr. Harrison studied the painting with the embedded legal documents. "These look authentic." "They are. The case number is right there." He turned back to David. "I think we need to have a conversation about your position at the hospital. Monday morning, my office." David's knees buckled. Nicole caught his arm. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "It's happening," I said. "It's been happening for years. You just never paid attention." Mom grabbed Dad's hand. "Henry, do something." Dad looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen before. Respect, maybe. Or fear. "What do you want, Daria?" "I want my painting back. I want Braxton's money returned. And I want all of you to understand that I'm not your backup plan anymore." "And if we do that? Then maybe Braxton doesn't press criminal charges." Braxton smiled. "Maybe." The crowd was taking pictures, recording videos, posting on social media. I could see the story spreading in real time. "The wedding," Nicole said again. "Will be very interesting," I said. "Assuming it happens." David looked around the room one more time, at all the people who now knew exactly who he was. "I hate you," he said quietly. "I know, but you'll respect me." He turned and pushed through the crowd, Nicole stumbling after him. Mom and Dad followed, leaving broken glass and shattered reputations behind. Jessica approached me with her recorder still running. "Any final thoughts?" I looked at my paintings, at the crowd still studying them, at Braxton counting potential buyers. Art isn't just decoration, it's truth. And truth has value, even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable. "What's next for you?" I smiled, watching Caden photograph a bidding war that had broken out over the Golden Child painting. "I'm going to keep painting, keep telling the truth, and maybe for the first time in my life, I'm going to get paid what I'm worth." The wedding happened. Sort of. I found out from Sarah, who called me Sunday morning while I was taking down the exhibition. "Daria, oh my God, you have to hear this." "I'm listening." "So we all showed up at the venue yesterday, right?" "Because we didn't know if the wedding was still on after Friday night. Half the guests had seen your art show, the other half had no idea what was happening." I balanced my phone between my shoulder and ear while wrapping paintings in bubble wrap. And Nicole was there in her dress, crying in the bridal suite. David was pacing around in his tux looking like he was going to throw up. Your parents were nowhere to be found. They didn't come? Oh, they came. But they were in the parking lot with two guys in suits who looked like lawyers or FBI agents or something. People were taking pictures through the windows. I stopped rapping. FBI? I don't know for sure, but they had badges. And your dad was signing papers. What about the ceremony? That's the best part. So the officiant is standing there. All the guests are seated and David finally comes out. But instead of wedding vows, he basically confesses to the whole crowd. He what? He said he and his family had made some mistakes with your art sale, and they needed to make things right before he could get married. Then he asked Nicole if she still wanted to marry him, knowing that their wedding was funded by, how did he put it? Questionable financial decisions. I sat down hard on a paint-stained chair. What did Nicole say? She said yes. Can you believe it? After everything, she still married him. Wow. But here's the thing. Half the wedding party walked out, including Nicole's maid of honor. And the photographer left when David couldn't pay him because apparently your parents' credit cards were frozen. Frozen? Something about the fraud investigation. Sarah from the bank was there. You know, Mom's friend from book club. And she said federal cases trigger automatic asset freezes. I looked around the gallery at my paintings, most of them now sold with little red dots next to the price tags. How much of the wedding actually happened? They said their vows to maybe 50 people instead of 200. No reception because the caterer demanded cash payment up front and they didn't have it. Nicole's dad was furious. Apparently he'd already paid for her dress and the flowers. Where are they now? David and Nicole? They went to a Denny's for their wedding dinner. I'm not kidding. Someone posted pictures on Instagram. I laughed despite myself. Denny's. Your brother, the surgeon, celebrating his wedding at Denny's because his new wife married a federal criminal. He's not a criminal yet. Give it time. After Sarah hung up, I continued packing while Caden documented everything for his photo series. 12 paintings sold, he said, checking his list. Total sales, $93,000. More than the original painting was worth. Revenge art sells. Who knew? Braxton appeared with a check and a bottle of champagne. Final payment for the series. And a bonus for the best art opening I've ever attended. Did you get your money back? The FBI froze their assets pending investigation, but my lawyers are confident I'll recover the full amount plus damages. He popped the champagne. Your parents signed a restitution agreement this morning. What does that mean? It means they admit guilt in exchange for reduced charges. They'll pay me back, return your painting, and probably do community service instead of jail time. And David? Medical board is reviewing his case. Fraud charges tend to complicate medical licenses. Anne arrived as we were finishing the champagne, carrying a folder full of papers. 3 galleries want to represent you, she said without preamble. 2 in New York, 1 in Los Angeles. And there's a documentary filmmaker who wants to option your story. Option? Buy the rights to make a film about the art fraud and your revenge exhibition. I stared at her. How much? Enough to buy your own gallery if you want one. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Nicole. Can we talk? I showed the message to Caden. Should I respond? What could she possibly want to say? I typed back. Talk about what? Her response came immediately. I want to apologize, and I want to buy one of your paintings. She wants to buy a painting? Which one? I texted. The one called Something Borrowed. The wedding dress made of legal documents. I want to hang it in our apartment. Caden read over my shoulder. That's either the most twisted thing I've ever heard, or the most honest. Maybe both, I typed. It's already sold. To who? I looked at Braxton, who was studying the painting in question. Actually, I think I'll keep that one. Why? Because some art isn't meant to be sold. Some art is meant to remind you who you are. Dad's car pulled up outside the gallery as we were loading the last paintings into Caden's van. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment before getting out and walking to the door. Daria? Hi, Dad. Can I see them? The paintings? They're sold, going to new homes. All of them? I pointed to something borrowed, still on its easel. Not that one. He studied it for a long time. The wedding dress made of shredded contracts, the bouquet of crumpled receipts, the veil woven from forged signatures. It's beautiful, he said finally. And terrible. That's the point. Your mother wants to talk to you. I'm sure she does. She's not the same person she was last week. None of us are. Good. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This came to the house. It's addressed to you. I opened it. Inside was a check for $70,000 and a note. Payment in full for threshold. Thank you for the lesson in authenticity. B. He paid twice. He bought the original from your parents for $70,000, then bought it again from the FBI auction for $70,000. Said he wanted to make sure you got what you were owed. I folded the check and put it in my pocket. Dad? Yeah? I'm not angry anymore. You're not. I'm free. There's a difference. He nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I'm proud of you, Daria. I should have said that years ago. You're saying it now. Is that enough? I looked at my painting, at the gallery where I'd told my truth, at the van full of sold artwork that would hang in homes across the country. It's a start. He walked back to his car, and I watched him drive away. Then I picked up something borrowed and carried it to my own car. Where are you taking it? Caden asked. Home, to remind me that some things are worth more than money. Like what? Like knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. I drove through the city with my painting in the back seat, past the gallery where this all started, past my parents' house, past the venue where David and Nicole had their Denny's wedding. My phone rang. It was Anne. The Times wants to interview you, and there's a collector in Tokyo who's offering 6 figures for your next series. What's the series about? Whatever you want. You're a known artist now, Daria. You have a reputation. I pulled into my studio parking lot and looked up at the windows where I'd spent years painting in obscurity, hoping someone would notice, someone would care. I know exactly what I want to paint next. What's that? Freedom. What it looks like when you finally stop asking for permission to exist. I hung up and carried my painting upstairs, past the musicians and sculptors and all the other artists who were still fighting to be seen. But I wasn't fighting anymore. I was just painting, and for the first time in my life, that was enough.
You ever sit at a table full of people who share your blood and feel like a ghost? No one bothers to... See? That was me. Every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. The chair was there, my plate was there, but I wasn't. I was background noise, something to glance past. My name is Indigo Walsh. I learned early that in my family, space and affection weren't given equally. My sister Lena could throw a tantrum about the color of a balloon and get a whole new party. I could bring home honor roll certificates or clock out from a double shift just to make rent. And all I got was a nod, if that. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong enough to live without applause. And for a while, I believed it. I worked. I built a little life. I found someone who made me think maybe I was finally seen. Ryan wasn't flashy, but he remembered how I liked my coffee and laughed at my jokes like they were the best thing in the world. For once, I thought I had something solid, something no one could take. But the thing about being invisible in your own family is that it teaches people they can erase you without consequence. The night I found out my sister was carrying my husband's child, I wasn't even surprised at how quickly everyone turned their faces toward her and away from me. What shocked me was the silence, the way no one even bothered to say my name as I stood up from that table and walked out. That silence was the crack where everything broke. And it was also where I decided, if no one else was going to see me, I would make myself impossible to ignore. The house I grew up in sat on a bluff overlooking Lake Huron, a place people would call picturesque if they didn't know what it felt like inside. From the outside, it looked calm: white siding, blue shutters, flower beds that my mom tended in the spring. But inside, there was a quiet hierarchy you could feel in every corner. Lena, my younger sister, was the sunbeam. That's what my mom called her. "Our little light!" She cried easily, laughed loudly, and demanded more than she ever gave. Somehow, that made her precious. When she broke a vase, my dad said, "Accidents happen." When I forgot to unload the dishwasher after school, I got a lecture about responsibility and discipline. I was the one who set my alarm early to shovel snow off the porch before Dad left for work. I was the one who folded laundry at the kitchen table while Lena sulked in her room because she didn't get the phone she wanted. Everyone knew I would take care of things. Everyone knew I would be fine. There's a cruelty in being the reliable one. It doesn't mean people admire you. It means they leave you out. You don't get help. You don't get sympathy. You get silence. By the time I was 16, I had 2 jobs: waitressing at a diner on weekends and cleaning vacation rentals in the summer. I saved every dollar because I knew if I wanted college, I had to find a way myself. Lena, on the other hand, barely scraped by her classes. When she dropped out junior year, my parents acted like she'd been through a war. "She's fragile," my mom said, and sent her to a beauty school in Florida, a place that looked more like a resort than anything else. I didn't protest. I swallowed the bitterness like medicine and kept moving. Because if I learned one thing early, it was that arguing didn't change a damn thing in that house. Still, not everything was cold. Lena and I had moments, the kind that trick you into thinking maybe you're not enemies after all. Singing along to the radio when I drove her to the mall, laughing over bowls of cereal at midnight, whispering secrets we promised not to tell. There were nights during thunderstorms when she would crawl into my bed, clutching her blanket, and I would hold her until she fell asleep. I clung to those nights, convincing myself they meant something real, that maybe one day she'd see me for who I was. But even then, even in those softer moments, I knew the truth. If the house caught fire and my parents had to choose, they'd run for her first. I carried that truth with me when I left home for community college 2 towns over. I didn't get a send-off dinner or a family photo on the porch steps. My dad just reminded me not to waste money. And my mom said, "Call if you need anything," in the same tone she used when she lent sugar to a neighbor. I should have felt free, driving away with my car packed tight and the windows rolled down to the summer air. But freedom is heavy when you know it's just another word for being on your own. And yet, I told myself that maybe this was what it meant to grow up, stepping out of the shadows, carving something for myself where no one could take it. I didn't know then how fragile that carving would be. I met Ryan at a hardware store, of all places. I was there for a pack of light bulbs and a plunger, and he was in the same aisle, comparing drill bits with the intensity of someone solving a crime. He looked up, caught me laughing under my breath, and instead of being embarrassed, he grinned. That grin stayed with me the rest of the day. He wasn't the kind of man people wrote ballads about. He didn't have a fancy job or a polished car. He worked maintenance for a small electrical company, came home with grease under his fingernails, and read Stephen King paperbacks until he fell asleep. But there was a steadiness to him, the kind that made me breathe easier. When he listened, he really listened. When he cooked dinner, it was simple: spaghetti, burgers on the grill. But he always made sure to serve me first. After years of being the one overlooked, I thought I'd finally found someone who saw me. We dated for 2 years before he proposed on the porch of the tiny apartment I rented near campus. No big gesture, no diamond ad commercial setup, just Ryan, nervous, holding a modest ring, saying, "You deserve someone who'll stay." I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small. We strung lights across a neighbor's backyard, borrowed folding chairs from the church, and made lemonade in pitchers. My parents showed up, but they didn't offer to help with costs. They claimed they were saving in case Lena decided to go back to school. She didn't even come. She was on a cruise with a man she'd known for less than a month. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Ryan, and for the first time, I wasn't alone. We bought a fixer-upper outside town, a two-bedroom cottage with chipped paint and a porch swing that squeaked when the wind picked up. It had a little patch of garden in the back, where lavender and wild daisies grew, stubborn and messy. I loved it. It was ours. Evenings there became my favorite part of life. Ryan would cook while I sat at the kitchen table, sketching ideas in a journal I kept, random recipes, soap blends, scraps of thought I never showed anyone. He'd hum along to the radio, and I'd feel a quiet peace seep into me, like maybe this was what normal felt like. Not fireworks, not chaos, just calm. I didn't realize how rare calm was, how fragile. Sometimes, when I looked out at that porch swing swaying, I'd imagine our future stretching out ahead like a straight road. Maybe kids one day, maybe a dog. A life with no sharp turns. After the constant imbalance of my childhood, that dream felt like treasure. Ryan wasn't perfect. He had moods he wouldn't explain, long silences when work stressed him. But he never raised his voice, never made me feel small, and that alone made me believe we had something unshakable. I remember one evening in particular. He brought home takeout because he said I looked tired. We ate in front of the TV, and afterward, he handed me a cup of tea exactly the way I liked it. 2 sugars, splash of milk, without me asking. I thought, this is what love looks like. Simple, steady, certain. I was wrong. Because love built on silence, on a foundation where you never question shadows, isn't certain at all. And soon, the shadows in my house began to move. It started small, so small I told myself it didn't matter. Lena called one night, her voice soft, shaky, the way she always sounded when she needed something. Her relationship had ended badly, she said. She couldn't stay where she was. Just for a week, she promised. Ryan glanced at me from across the couch, shook his head almost imperceptibly, but I ignored it. She was my sister, family, and my parents' silence on the matter told me everything. They expected me to step in. So I did. She arrived with 2 suitcases, a cloud of perfume, and a smile too wide for someone whose life was supposedly unraveling. She hugged Ryan a second too long, then breezed into the guest room like she'd reserved it months in advance. The first few days, I tried to pretend it was normal. She lingered in the kitchen when Ryan cooked, asking him questions about spices, laughing too loudly at his dry jokes. She borrowed my sweaters without asking, returned them, stretched out, and smelling of her perfume. I let it go. I'd spent my life letting things go. But then came the morning I found her sitting on the counter in one of Ryan's t-shirts, her hair wet from the shower, legs swinging like she belonged there. She grinned at him as he flipped pancakes, and he didn't even look startled. I froze in the doorway, then turned and walked back upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I had to lock the bedroom door and press my back to it just to breathe. I told myself I was paranoid, that siblings and spouses could coexist, that I was tired, overthinking, but deep down, I knew. The air had shifted. It all came to a head one Sunday when we were at my parents' house for dinner. My dad grilled steaks. My mom set her famous green bean casserole on the table, and for a fleeting moment, it almost felt like the family we pretended to be. Then Lena stood up, wine glass in hand, her eyes glittering with something smug and dangerous. "I have an announcement," she said, resting her palm on her stomach. "Ryan and I are having a baby." At first, I laughed. It had to be a joke, some twisted performance. But when I looked at Ryan, he didn't deny it. He stared down at his plate, shoulders tight, and the silence in the room turned into a roar inside my head. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the glass in my hand. Though part of me wanted to, I sat there, staring at the chipped edge of my mother's table, waiting for someone, anyone, to look at me, to say my name, to defend me. No one did. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even Ryan. And when I finally pushed my chair back, my mother's hand brushed my wrist. "Indigo," she murmured, almost bored. "Please don't make this about you." Those words carved something out of me, not just because of what they meant, but because of how calm she sounded, like I was being dramatic, like I wasn't reacting the way any human being would if gutted at their own family table. I stood. I walked out. No one followed. On the drive home, the road blurred, headlights bleeding into one another as I tried to breathe through the crack in my chest. I had lost them all in one sweep: my husband, my sister, my parents. But it wasn't until later that night, staring at the dark ceiling of the guest room I didn't want to enter, that I realized I hadn't just lost them. I had been disposable to them all along. The night after that dinner, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly until my tank hit empty, then parked outside a 24-hour gas station and sat in the car with my coat pulled tight. My phone buzzed once. A text from Ryan. "We didn't mean for it to happen like this." No apology, no plea, just damage control. I stared at those words until the screen went black, and then I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. When I finally went back to the cottage the next day, I didn't unpack. I stuffed what I could into 3 duffel bags, the essentials of a life I thought was permanent, and I left the keys on the counter. Ryan wasn't even there. He didn't try to stop me. That silence was almost worse than betrayal. It told me I had never really mattered. Losing him was one thing. Losing my family was another. I called my mother, desperate for some sliver of humanity. She sighed before I could finish my sentence. "Lena isn't the villain here. Indigo. You and Ryan had problems long before she came back." It was like she'd rehearsed the line. I asked, "So this is my fault?" She paused, then said, "We're just trying to move forward as a family." A family that didn't include me. I bounced from a friend's couch to a motel room with flickering lights. Sleep impossible. Gossip in a small town travels fast. People whispered behind their shopping carts. Pity in their eyes. I became a title, the woman whose sister stole her husband. Then Ryan twisted the knife. My manager called me into the office at the boutique soap studio, where I'd been working part-time. "We're restructuring," she said gently. Later, a co-worker messaged me privately. "You didn't hear it from me, but Ryan told them you were unstable, distracted, a problem." That night, I sat in my car outside the dark studio, fists clenched around the wheel, and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just move on. I would build something they couldn't touch, something strong enough that no one could erase me again. I had lost my husband, my family, my name, but in that loss, a spark caught fire. Starting over was slower than I imagined. My new apartment was barely more than a box, with cracked tile floors and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. One night, while digging through unpacked boxes, I found the old journal where I used to scribble formulas for handmade soaps. Lavender, oatmeal, honey, half-formed notes that suddenly felt like lifelines. I scraped together a microloan, bought supplies, and turned my kitchen into a workshop. Burnt fingers, spilled oils, late nights bent over batches that didn't set right. None of it scared me. I was finally making something no one else could take. A pop-up stand at the Sunday market led to an Etsy shop. Orders trickled in, then surged after a customer posted a review online. Soon I had a rented studio space near the river. For the first time in my life, people sought me out. My name, not Lena's. My work, not Ryan's shadow. Then, one rainy Wednesday, the studio doorbell jingled, and there she was, Lena. Her hair was unwashed, her lips cracked, a baby balanced on her hip. "Eli," she called him. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. Ryan had left weeks after the birth. Drained the account. Vanished. She said I was all she had left. I stood frozen, staring at the child's wide brown eyes. Innocent. Blameless. And I felt something I couldn't name. Anger and tenderness knotted together. Against every instinct, I gave her the spare room. For a short while, Lena tiptoed around me, folding laundry, thanking me too much, playing the part of someone who wanted to rebuild. But the act cracked. I found emails she'd sent under my name, attaching a fake license, trying to claim supplier rights to my business. When I confronted her, she didn't flinch. "You built this on pain I gave you," she said coldly. "You owe me." That was the moment I knew. Lena hadn't come back to repent. She'd come back to take. The night I discovered Lena's betrayal, I told her we were getting a paternity test. Her face drained of color, but she said nothing. The next morning, she was gone. The guest room was stripped bare, the suitcase missing. Only Eli remained, left behind in his crib, clutching a worn blanket. For a moment, panic seized me, not because I missed her, but because she had abandoned her son like yesterday's trash. I called my mother. She already knew. She thought you'd be better equipped to care for him, she said softly, as if that excused everything. I hung up before she could say more. The decision was made. I filed for guardianship. Social workers visited, asked endless questions, checked Eli's room, his records, his daycare. I showed them everything. I told them the truth. 3 months later, the papers came. He was mine. When Lena resurfaced, it was in a courtroom, not at my door. She was gaunt, eyes hollow, her lawyer shuffling papers that couldn't save her. She wanted custody back. But the judge had evidence. The affidavit from Eli's biological father, the emails proving her fraud, the history of theft and abandonment. The ruling wasn't even close. Custody stayed with me. The silence after the gavel fell was heavier than any shouting match. No one defended her, not my parents, not Ryan, not even her own attorney. She was utterly alone. I walked out with Eli's small hand in mine, my head high, the world outside brighter than it had been in years. That night, I tucked Eli into bed and lit one of my lavender soaps, watching the light flicker against glass jars stacked neatly on my studio shelves. I realized revenge didn't have to be loud. It could be this: a quiet life they couldn't poison, a child they had thrown away who now had a home, a business they tried to steal that still carried my name. Forgiveness. I understood then. Wasn't about letting someone back in. It was about walking forward without guilt, without chains, and without looking over my shoulder. Eli murmured, "Mama," in his sleep, and for once, I felt seen. My name is Blanche Everett, and on the morning of my sister's MBA graduation, I parked my dented Honda at the far end of the university lot and told myself I would not flinch. The air smelled like damp pavement and cologne, and everywhere I looked, families streamed toward the auditorium in polished shoes and tailored suits. I clutched a small gift bag in my lap. Inside, a silver pen I'd bought after weeks of extra shifts, while across the aisle, a young man balanced a bouquet of roses for his girlfriend. From the corner of my eye, I saw my father stride past. Pressed jacket, polished shoes, the proud grin of a man who believed he had raised one shining success. He didn't notice me until I cleared my throat. He offered a nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give a distant neighbor, and kept walking. My sister Vanessa was beside him, radiant in her gown, her blonde hair curled to perfection. She caught sight of me and tilted her chin, the corners of her mouth curving into that smirk she'd perfected since high school, the look that said I was beneath her, that my apron and late-night shifts defined my entire worth. I sat there, smoothing the wrinkles of my department store dress, watching her wave to classmates as though she were royalty. People looked at her with admiration, and when their eyes slid to me, I felt the familiar sting of invisibility. But I didn't come here to beg for attention, or even for scraps of recognition. I came because there are moments when truth waits patiently in the shadows, and today, that truth was sitting right inside my chest. They thought they knew the roles in this family, the star and the failure. They had no idea who had built the stage beneath their feet. The auditorium hummed with anticipation as families jostled for good seats, cameras already flashing before the ceremony even began. I slid into a spot on the second row, far enough back to avoid being in the middle of things, close enough that Vanessa couldn't accuse me of skipping her big day. I folded the gift bag carefully onto my lap and tried not to think about the grease stains that never fully washed out of my hands, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Dad settled a few chairs down from me, leaving a deliberate space between us. He didn't speak again, just pulled out his phone and tapped at the screen as though the notifications from work were more pressing than his eldest daughter. That empty seat felt like a canyon. I remembered when it hadn't been like this, when he'd saved me a chair at Vanessa's high school graduation, when we'd clapped side by side. That was before he decided I'd taken the wrong turn in life, before every conversation became a subtle comparison I could never win. The graduates filed in to the sound of organ music, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Vanessa's figure was easy to spot, her posture perfect, her smile dazzling under the auditorium lights. She caught sight of me almost immediately, her eyes lingering just long enough to remind me I was still the designated disappointment. Then she leaned toward the girl next to her, whispered something, and both of them stifled their laughter. My face burned, but I kept still. Years of practice had taught me that reacting only gave her more fuel. Around me, proud parents dabbed at their eyes and whispered to one another about scholarships, job offers, bright futures. Their pride felt effortless, unconditional. I sat stiff, my palms pressed to my knees, trying not to imagine what it might feel like to be on the receiving end of that kind of love. A swell of applause greeted the dean as he approached the podium. I forced myself to clap along, though inside, unease twisted through me. The ceremony had barely begun, but I could already sense the weight of what was coming. Vanessa had always been theatrical, always hungry for an audience. And today, she had the grandest one of her life. When Vanessa's name was called, she glided across the stage as if she'd been born to walk under spotlights. The dean shook her hand, and she lifted her chin toward the crowd, posing for photos with that effortless confidence that made people believe she was destined for greatness. I clapped as hard as anyone, raising my hands so she couldn't miss it, but her eyes found mine with a calculating glimmer. It wasn't gratitude she showed me, it was triumph. Later, when the dean invited a few graduates to speak, Vanessa nearly leapt from her seat. She adjusted the microphone like it belonged to her, smiled sweetly at the crowd, and began her speech. At first, she spoke of hard work and faculty support, thanking classmates and professors with a graciousness that drew approving nods. Dad leaned forward in his chair, chest puffed with pride. Then her tone shifted, just enough for me to feel the chill before the words landed. "Education has always been valued in my family," she said brightly. "Well, mostly?" A ripple of polite laughter passed through the audience. She let the pause stretch. "My sister is still waitressing at 35. I guess brains aren't exactly genetic." The room erupted, not in the controlled chuckles of courtesy, but genuine laughter, loud enough to sting my ears. I kept my eyes on the dean, my face perfectly still. I knew if I let even one flicker of hurt show, Vanessa would drink it in like champagne. Dad chuckled too, turning to the family in front of him. "One success, one failure," he announced, his voice just loud enough to carry. The husband nodded knowingly, as if Dad had imparted some great truth. The wife looked horrified, but not enough to intervene. My pulse hammered. I sat frozen, gift bag still in my lap, fingers digging into the handles until they bit my skin. For years, I'd absorbed these cuts, telling myself they didn't matter. But sitting there, listening to strangers laugh at my expense, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was resolve, sharp, steady, unshakable. Vanessa went on, basking in applause, talking about leadership, innovation, and opportunity. All I heard was the hollow ring of hypocrisy. Because if only she knew, every step she'd taken here had been made possible by the sister she mocked. I didn't move when the ceremony ended, not even as families crowded the aisles to congratulate their graduates. Vanessa was swarmed with hugs and camera flashes, her diploma clutched high like a trophy. Dad's voice boomed as he introduced her to anyone who would listen, as if her victory erased every other truth. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, watching, silent, letting their little performance play out. Because what none of them knew, what they could never imagine, was that I had signed every scholarship check that carried Vanessa through this program. I had approved her admission, sat in meetings that decided which departments got funding, and helped shape the very stage she stood on. She thought she was shining on her own. The irony tasted bitter and sweet all at once. The memories tugged at me. Late nights hunched over budget reports after finishing a diner shift, coffee going cold as I studied enrollment numbers and faculty contracts. I remembered the first time I walked into a boardroom in borrowed heels, my hands trembling as I laid out a plan to rescue a university drowning in debt. They had underestimated me, too, until my numbers held. Until my vision worked. Vanessa had thrived inside the safe walls I built, never once questioning why her struggling university suddenly had world-class professors, gleaming new labs, or corporate partnerships. She assumed it was luck or prestige. She never wondered who had paid for it. Standing there, I realized the cruelty of her words didn't wound me the way they once might have. What hurt more was the certainty in her face, the smug belief that she understood my place in the world. She didn't know that the place I'd carved was bigger than hers could ever be. As families began to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Dean Howard Grant, beautifully executed as always. "Are you still set for tomorrow?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, more ready than ever. Tomorrow, the curtain would rise again. Only this time, Vanessa and Dad wouldn't be the stars of the show. They'd be the audience, watching me. That night, after the noise of the graduation faded, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights low and the documents spread out in front of me. The smell of fried onions from the diner still clung to my uniform, but on the pages, numbers and strategies gleamed like polished armor. This was the life they never saw, the one I built in silence. The truth was, the foundation hadn't sprung from nowhere. It began with grief, the kind that presses on your chest until breathing feels optional. After my husband's accident, I received the settlement no one talks about without whispering. Most assumed I used it to cover bills, maybe tuck away a small cushion. They had no idea I turned that money into something alive. While they pitied me, I studied market reports and academic case studies. I learned how universities crumble, and more importantly, how they survive. The boardroom had been my second battlefield. The first time I spoke up, men twice my age blinked at me like I was a waitress who'd wandered into the wrong room. But numbers don't care who delivers them. Mine lined up, my proposals held, and when enrollment doubled in 2 years, they stopped looking at my shoes and started listening to my voice. Dean Grant became my quiet ally. He learned quickly that I wasn't chasing glory, only results. Together, we built programs that attracted students, faculty, and donors. We crafted the Clarewell Foundation into a shield for the university and into my veil of anonymity. And through it all, I kept serving tables, the perfect camouflage. People assume a waitress doesn't know how to read a balance sheet, or negotiate contracts, or fund an entire scholarship program. That assumption was my weapon. Vanessa had never once looked behind the curtain. Her arrogance blinded her, and maybe that was what stung the most. Not her insults, but her ignorance. She believed she was untouchable, the chosen one. Tomorrow, she would learn who had chosen her path all along. The next morning, the sky broke open with rain, gray sheets pouring over the campus, as if the heavens themselves were preparing for a cleansing. I arrived early, wearing my best navy suit, the one I saved for board meetings and funerals. The conference hall was buzzing when I stepped inside. This wasn't a graduation crowd anymore. This was polished donors, trustees, and select families invited to witness recognition of those who had kept the university alive. I spotted Vanessa near the entrance, immaculate in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my rent. Her heels clicked across the marble floor as she scanned the room, confusion clouding her face. Dad trailed behind her, stiff in his sport coat, whispering questions she clearly couldn't answer. When her eyes found me seated near the front, she frowned. "What are you doing here? Did they hire you to serve coffee?" She muttered under her breath as she passed. I didn't answer. Dean Grant adjusted the microphone, his voice firm as the room settled. Yesterday, we celebrated individual achievements. Today, we honor the generosity that made those achievements possible. The past 4 years have seen an unprecedented transformation of this institution, thanks to a single benefactor who asked for no recognition until now. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Chairs creaked as people craned their necks, expecting to see some aging millionaire step forward. Vanessa leaned closer to Dad, eyes darting eagerly around the room. The Clarewell Foundation, the dean continued, has contributed over $3 million, funded scholarships, recruited faculty, and ensured every student had a chance to succeed. And today, for the first time, I have the privilege of naming its sole director. The room hushed. I felt the weight of every eye as his gaze locked with mine. Please join me in recognizing Blanche Everett. The silence cracked like thunder. Vanessa's program slipped from her hand and fluttered to the floor. Dad's jaw clenched, his eyes flicking between me and the dean, as though the world had tilted sideways. For once, I didn't look away. I didn't stand right away. The dean gestured toward me, waiting, the silence in the hall stretching until it trembled. Slowly, I rose from my chair, smoothed the front of my suit, and gave a small nod. That was all. No speech, no grand gesture. Just acknowledgement. The recognition itself was enough. For a moment, no one seemed to breathe. Then the whispers swelled, circling the room like a storm. The waitress. Someone muttered, "She's the benefactor." Another voice, sharp with disbelief. "Wasn't she the one mocked yesterday?" Vanessa stared at me as though she'd never seen my face before. Her lips parted, her eyes wide and unblinking. I could see the tremor in her hands as she bent to pick up her program, her composure slipping through her fingers as easily as the paper had. Dad was worse. Rigid, pale, caught between confusion and something that looked alarmingly like fear. The dean waited for me to join him at the podium, but I shook my head. I had no interest in speeches. I wanted them to sit with the weight of what they'd heard, without any relief, without me softening it for them. So I returned to my seat, folding my hands neatly in my lap, watching the reality sink in. Vanessa's whisper reached me even through the hum of the room. "This isn't real," she said, shaking her head, almost pleading. "It can't be." Dad finally found his voice, low and strangled. "Blanche, is this true?" I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. Every word. The crowd began to disperse in uneasy silence, people stealing glances at me, then at Vanessa, as if replaying yesterday's cruel joke in their minds. By the time the last chairs scraped back, the humiliation had shifted. It no longer clung to me. It clung to them. I walked out without hurry, the sound of my heels echoing in the hollow space they'd left behind. I didn't need applause or forgiveness. The revelation had done its work. The fallout began quietly, with an envelope. A week after the ceremony, Vanessa received her first letter from West Financial Services, the subsidiary I had prepared months earlier. Inside was a statement outlining her remaining student debt, $95,000, now transferred to my firm. Payment schedules, interest rates, my name at the bottom. The first phone call came while I was wiping down tables at the diner. I let it ring. The second came as I refilled coffee for a trucker on the night shift. I silenced it. By the third, I listened to her voicemail, frantic, disbelieving, begging me to explain how her forgiven loans had transformed into a mountain of debt. Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through every syllable. 2 days later, she appeared at the diner, hair unkempt, eyes rimmed red. She slid into a booth and waited until I finished serving a family of 4. When I finally approached, she stood, blocking my path. "We need to talk," she said, her voice stripped of the smooth confidence she used to wield like a blade. I kept moving, stacking plates. "I'm working. You can see that." "Blanche, please," she whispered, following me behind the counter. "I can't pay this. Not on what I make starting out. How could you do this to me?" I met her eyes for the first time. "The same way you stood on that stage and mocked me. Choices have consequences, Vanessa. You earned this debt with every word you spoke." Her face crumpled, and for a fleeting second, I saw the little sister I once shielded from playground bullies. But the sympathy didn't hold. She had chosen arrogance over kindness too many times. Dad tried next, calling with forced calm. Honey, there's been some mistake with Vanessa's loans. Maybe you can fix it through your connections? It's not a mistake, I said, watching rain streak down the diner window. She'll pay it back. Every cent. The silence on the line was heavy, like he was realizing for the first time that the daughter he dismissed now held all the cards. And I intended to keep them. The 4th of July barbecue should have felt familiar. Paper plates, the hiss of the grill, the snap of sparklers in the hands of neighborhood kids. But the air carried a new weight, one that pressed down on every word spoken around the picnic table. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the shadow in the corner. I was the gravity everyone orbited. Vanessa arrived late, her smile brittle, her laughter forced. She avoided my gaze, speaking only when directly addressed, her sentences clipped and cautious. I could almost hear the math running in her head, calculating how many years of payments it would take before she was free of me. Dad tried to keep the conversation light, but every glance he sent my way carried something unfamiliar. Hesitation, maybe even respect. Uncle Ray asked about the foundation, his tone full of curiosity rather than judgment. Aunt Linda chimed in, saying how incredible it was that students like Vanessa had been able to benefit from my generosity. The word lucky lingered in the air, sharp as a blade. Vanessa stiffened, eyes fixed on her plate. When she finally spoke, it was in a low voice meant only for me. I'm going to pay every penny back. I won't ask you to forgive it. Her jaw trembled, but her words held steady. For the first time, she sounded less like the golden child and more like someone forced to grow up. I set down my fork and met her eyes. Good. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. As the evening wound down, fireworks burst overhead, their colors scattering across the dark sky. I leaned back in my chair, the noise around me fading into the background. For the first time since my husband's death, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They had underestimated me, laughed at me, even called me a failure. But now they knew. And knowing was enough. Sometimes the people you dismiss hold the power to change everything. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one you should have listened to all along. My name is Gertrude Lawson, and tonight I'm seated at a round table no one planned for, wedged between the coat rack and a door marked Employees Only. The napkin is folded like a consolation prize. There's no place card with my name, only a glass of water that tastes faintly of ice and indifference. From the dais, the string lights glow warm, flattering the people who remembered to belong to one another. I didn't come to perform, and I didn't wear sparkles. I wore what still fits the truth. Clara, my sister, taps the microphone with a bride's entitlement and a comedian's smile. Let's toast my big sister, she says, eyes sliding past me like I'm part of the wallpaper. She works in whatever bunker she works in. If anyone gets lost later, maybe she can GPS us back to the dance floor. Laughter shakes the centerpieces. Crystal hums like a tiny storm. I lift the glass, but I don't drink. The room tilts toward her, the way rooms always have. I won't chase it. Years ago, I learned that some lessons arrive in silence and are understood without applause. A chair scrapes. Not nearby, up front. Daniel, the groom, has gone still. The smile stalled on his face like a plane stuck on a runway. He leans toward his father, and I recognize the silhouette before the name returns. General Robert Keaton. He's standing now, slower than the music, sharper than the lights. The quartet falters. The servers freeze mid-step, flutes poised. My pulse doesn't race. It steadies, as if my heart knows a formation I forgot to call. General Keaton faces me. He adjusts his jacket, lifts his hand in a crisp line, and salutes. Every laugh evaporates. No one looks at the bride. Everyone looks at the woman by the service door, me. I was not always the shadow at family gatherings. Once, I thought the uniform I earned would draw us closer, that the shine of the brass and the starch of the fabric might matter to people whose love I mistook for loyalty. I was 21 when that illusion snapped. It was the night before Clara's high school graduation. The house smelled of lemon pie and floor polish, the kind of over-prepared cleanliness my mother thrived on when company was expected. I came home wearing my newly issued cadet dress uniform, boots polished so sharply I could see my reflection in them. I thought maybe she would look up and see me differently, see the daughter who had done something hard and stayed the course. Instead, dessert had just been served when my mother set down her fork, her voice even and flat. "If you wear that tomorrow, don't come." She didn't look at me after she said it. My father stirred his coffee without raising his eyes. Clara smirked at her plate, her phone buzzing in her lap with some boy's attention. I didn't argue. I folded my napkin, pushed back the chair, and walked out. No one followed. Not even the dog. That was the last evening I spent under that roof. I left without a suitcase, without family photos, without second chances. It was freedom disguised as rejection, and I carried it with me into every deployment, every briefing room, every lonely hotel overseas. I learned to live without a seat at their table. Years passed that way, birthdays unmarked, holidays ignored, postcards left unsent. Clara built her world of ribbons and pastel smiles while I worked in shadows that left no scrapbook. She wore crowns, I wore silence. But silence teaches you what applause never will. It teaches you where the weight of truth lies. So when that envelope arrived months ago, glittered, perfumed, announcing her wedding like a Broadway show, I almost tossed it with the junk mail. Almost. Then I saw the groom's last name, Keaton, and the memory of a hallway in the Pentagon hit me like a sharp intake of breath. A general had once stopped me there, eyes clear, words blunt. If you were a man, they'd have minted a coin with your face already. And now his son was marrying my sister. That was the moment I knew I would go. Not for Clara, not for the family who had erased Mia, but because some reckonings can only happen face to face. The invitation itself felt like a performance. Heavy cardstock rimmed in gold foil, embossed lettering that screamed money borrowed rather than money earned. At the bottom, in Clara's handwriting, was a note. "Cocktail attire only, please, no uniforms. It's a wedding, not a war room." I laughed once, short and sharp, the kind of laugh that belongs to disbelief more than amusement. She still wanted to script how I appeared, even after decades apart. I placed the envelope on my desk, between a classified briefing and a stack of unread reports. For a week it sat there, glitter catching the light every time I reached for a pen. I told myself I wouldn't go, that no good could come of stepping back into a story I'd already walked away from. But then I kept staring at that last name, Keaton, and the decision formed in silence. General Robert Keaton had crossed my path once before. I was younger then, bone-tired after presenting a classified scenario on orbital defense that left me drained of language. I had stepped into the hallway, head down, when his voice cut across the marble. "Lawson?" He'd studied my nameplate, then delivered a line that never left me. "If you were a man, they'd already carved your likeness into a medal." He wasn't flattering me. He was indicting the system, and I knew it. Now his son was about to vow forever to Clara, the sister who had mastered the art of glittering facades. Part of me wondered if fate had a cruel sense of humor. Another part wondered if perhaps it was finally time for my truth to stop being silent. So I booked the ticket. The flight was late, the kind where the terminal echoes with cleaning crews and gate agents barely awake. I packed nothing extravagant, just my dress blues, pressed and folded, silver insignia still gleaming. I didn't wear them to provoke. I wore them because they were the truest reflection of me that remained. When the cab dropped me at the hotel near the estate, dawn was only a thin gray line behind palm trees. I stood at the mirror, fastening each button as if it were an answer to a question only I had asked. Clara wanted sparkle. She would get steel instead. And I wanted nothing more than to see whether the man who once named the bias, out loud, would recognize me again in a room built to forget me. The estate looked like a movie set, every inch designed for photographs instead of people. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from ceilings swaddled in silk, and walls were lined with roses thick enough to drown in. Guests drifted in, wearing sequins and champagne smiles, the kind of smiles that had rehearsed themselves in front of mirrors. I searched the mirrored seating chart, each name etched in gold script and backlit like gallery art. Row after row of acquaintances, college roommates, distant cousins, but not mine. No Lawson, no Gertrude. Not even a vague +1. A server passed by with a tray of sparkling flutes. I took one, let the bubbles bite at my lip, and slipped into a chair near the back. It wasn't a table so much as an afterthought, squeezed against the exit door with a fern blocking the fire alarm. I had brought a protein bar in my clutch just in case. Experience had taught me not to expect a place at anyone's feast. The music swelled, the chatter hushed, and Clara took the microphone. Rhinestones in her hair caught the lights, scattering diamonds across her dress. She already looked drunk on her own reflection. "And now," she purred, "a toast to my sister, Gertrude." Every head turned toward me like I was a rare specimen. Clara grinned wider. "She showed up in uniform, of course. I mean, who does that?" We were worried she might salute the cake. Maybe she can recalibrate the GPS if anyone gets lost on the dance floor. Laughter rolled across the room, thick and rehearsed, like she had scripted it in advance. Someone whispered near me, "I thought she worked at NASA or something." I didn't move. I let the words settle the way dust does in a room no one bothers to clean. Clara had always been the princess. My role had always been the dragon. And even now, she needed me to be the punchline. I kept my glass on the table, my back straight. Legends don't argue. Legends wait. And in that moment, I waited for the air to shift, because some rooms collapse under the weight of their own cruelty. The shift came as sudden as a storm breaking over still water. 1 second the room was alive with Clara's laughter and the tinkle of cutlery, and the next, it thinned into silence so precise it felt orchestrated. I noticed Daniel first. His smile faltered, glass trembling slightly in his hand. His eyes slid sideways toward the head table, where his father sat. General Robert Keaton hadn't moved yet, but the air around him already carried authority, the kind that doesn't fade with retirement. His gaze swept the room, then landed squarely on me. Recognition lit slow and certain. He pushed his chair back, the sound of wood scraping against polished floor louder than the quartet still trying to play. The bow slid off a violin string with a squeak, then stopped altogether. General Keaton stood, adjusting his cuffs with deliberate care, every movement echoing decades of discipline. Then, without hesitation, he lifted his hand to his forehead. The salute was crisp, unwavering, unmistakable. "Ma'am!" His voice carried, clear as a bell in the hush. "The honor is ours to have you here." For a moment, no one breathed. Forks froze in midair. Champagne flutes hovered inches from lips. And then it began. One officer in dress blues rose from table 4, then a naval commander in a wheelchair near the aisle. A Marine captain followed, then another, until a wave of uniforms and civilians alike stood in silent acknowledgement. Even the DJ, hand over heart, stopped the music. The microphone slipped from Clara's hand, crashing against the floor with a pop that echoed like a gunshot. Her jaw hung open as she turned to her father-in-law, searching for rescue. None came. All eyes shifted, not to the bride, not to the dance floor, but to the woman seated alone at the back near the exit. I didn't stand. I didn't need to. I nodded once, steady, measured. It wasn't permission. It wasn't pride. It was confirmation. For the first time in years, I wasn't Clara's sister or the forgotten relative. I was Colonel Gertrude Lawson. And they finally saw me. Applause never followed, nor did I expect it. The room stayed hushed, thick with the realization that the joke had backfired. Clara's hand trembled as she bent to snatch the microphone from the floor, but the crack in her voice betrayed her. It was just a joke, she said, too softly at first, then louder. Just a joke. No one laughed with her this time. I sat still, letting the silence expand until it pressed against every wall of the ballroom. My glass caught the light, steady in my hand, while Clara shrank under her own spotlight. And as she faltered, my mind traveled back to the letter, the one that had derailed my promotion 4 years earlier. I had been shortlisted for Brigadier General. After 2 decades of classified operations and deployments, no family photograph had ever captured. Then, out of nowhere, an anonymous complaint surfaced. Accusations of inflating mission credit, of claiming leadership I hadn't earned. The language was vague, but sharp enough to wound. What stopped me, cold though, was one word buried halfway down the page. Irregardless. It was more than a mistake. It was a signature. Clara had used that word since high school, tossing it into arguments like confetti, convinced it made her sound clever. Teachers corrected her, friends teased her, but she clung to it stubbornly. No one else in my world of officers and analysts would have written it. No one but her. I remembered the sting of reading those lines. My name stripped from the promotion list without explanation. The calls unreturned. The silence that spread through briefing rooms when my presence had once carried weight. It had taken me years to claw my way back into the command track. And still, the shadow of that letter trailed me. Watching Clara stumble on her wedding day, I finally understood. She hadn't just wanted the spotlight. She had wanted me erased from the stage entirely. And yet, there I sat, recognized by the very man whose son she had married, honored by strangers who understood what sacrifice looked like. The reckoning she tried to delay had arrived anyway. 3 days later, I found myself at Reagan National, waiting for a delayed flight. My orders were folded neatly in my coat pocket, a black coffee cooling at my side. I had already left the wedding group chat without a word. No one noticed. The sound of hurried footsteps broke through the monotony of announcements. I turned, and there was Clara. No gown, no glitter, just jeans and a worn sweatshirt with her college logo cracked and fading. For the first time in years, she looked younger, stripped of her rehearsed glow. She didn't come close right away. She just stood 10 feet away, rummaging in her leather tote until she pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Even before I touched it, I knew. The letter. She held it out like an offering. I took it without speaking, unfolded the creases, and saw the familiar words circled in red ink. Irregardless. Proof I'd never needed, but now held in my hand. You always corrected me on that, Clara said quietly, her voice raw. Even in middle school essays. I waited. She bit her lip, eyes glassy, but not with fake tears this time. They wanted a daughter who sparkled, who smiled at the right times. I gave them that. But it meant you had to disappear. Her voice cracked. I just wanted them to love me. I studied her, this woman who had once laughed as I left the dinner table with nothing but keys in my hand. She wasn't asking forgiveness, not yet, but the veneer had cracked. You wanted to erase me, I said, not angry, just steady. But you forgot who taught me to endure. Clara nodded, a shaky breath catching in her chest. You did. That's the part I could never erase. For a long moment, we stood on airport carpet. Not rivals, not strangers. Just 2 sisters staring at the wreckage of years. No bridge was built, not yet. But a hairline fracture in the glass let the light through. She stepped back, tugging her bag higher. Gate 45's mine, she whispered. Coach this time. I watched her walk away. She didn't look back. And I didn't stop her. When I boarded my flight that evening, the folded letter still sat in my bag, like a weight I didn't know whether to carry or discard. I didn't read it again. I didn't need to. The damage had already been done, and so had the revelation. What mattered now was what I chose to build from the ruins. Back on base. I threw myself into drafting something that had lived in the back of my mind for years. I called it the Aurelia program, a quiet network designed for service members betrayed not by enemies abroad, but by the very people closest to them. Husbands who sabotaged wives, brothers who leaked information, parents who used shame as a weapon. These wounds didn't leave visible scars, but they carved deep nonetheless. I knew what it felt like to be erased without a bruise to prove it. I knew the silence that followed, the way commanders shifted uneasily, the way colleagues avoided eye contact. And I refused to let anyone else drown in that kind of invisibility. The first time I presented Irelia to a closed circle of officers, the room stayed still in a way that told me I wasn't alone. They leaned in when I described confidential reporting, counseling, and legal guidance woven into one net of protection. Not to punish blindly, but to keep soldiers from being shattered by the very families who should have been their refuge. One man, an advisor who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, spoke up. My niece left the army last fall, said her brother betrayed her trust. She didn't file anything. She just vanished. If this had existed, then he didn't finish, but the look in his eyes was enough. In that moment, I realized the program wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every quiet survivor who had stayed in the shadows because there had been no place to stand. I wasn't seeking applause, or vengeance, or even vindication. What I wanted was simple, a choice for the next soldier like me. Not between silence and exile, but between staying, healing, and rising. I never returned to Clara's wedding photographs. I didn't need to see how the story was framed afterward, or how she might have edited herself back into the center. What mattered was that, for one undeniable moment, the spotlight had shifted, and the truth had spoken louder than laughter. Life since then hasn't been about revenge. It has been about reclamation. I no longer wait for a place card at someone else's table. I build my own. And at that table, there is always an empty chair, not for family who chose silence, but for the younger version of me who nearly gave up. She deserves to sit there, to see how far we came. The Aurelia program grows quietly, one voice at a time. Sometimes a soldier emails to say thank you. Sometimes a spouse admits they finally feel less alone. Each story tells me the same thing. Betrayal doesn't have the last word. Recognition does. I live without expecting apologies. Clara may never ask for forgiveness, and my mother may never call me her pride. That is no longer the measure of my worth. What I needed, I already have. The knowledge that I am not invisible. And if there is one thing I want anyone to take from my story, it is this. Do not let anyone convince you that disappearing is the price of love. We do not need permission to exist. We only need the courage to stay standing when others would rather see us erased. My name is Esther Malone, and I knew something was off the moment the tray came out shining like a prize I was never meant to touch. By noon, I had polished the silver, ironed linen napkins until the creases could cut, and carried pitchers that sweated. The patio smelled like salt and seared fat. The cousins laughed at stories I'd never been part of. When I finally slid into my chair, the stem of my water glass singing against the plate, I told myself to breathe and keep my hands steady. Marjorie, my mother-in-law, arrived with 7 perfect fillets glistening under a veil of steam. She moved with a hostess's smile, setting plates before Walter, before Clara, before Daniel, before every person who fit her idea of us. When her shadow crossed my place setting, it just kept going. A small white box appeared next, ribboned and smug. Imported tarts, announced for family. Forks lifted. Conversations resumed. My plate held a half-cooled scrap of roast chicken that tasted like apology. Aunt Sharon cleared her throat. Marjorie, didn't you make one for Esther? The air thinned. Marjorie didn't look at me. I only ordered for family, she said, as if explaining the weather. My pulse thudded against the napkin ring. I turned to Daniel. He kept cutting, head lowered, careful. Am I family or not? I asked him. The knives around us paused. He didn't meet my eyes. Don't do this here, he muttered. But there was nowhere else. The glasses chimed with the smallest tremor, and in that tremor, lived 7 years of favors dressed as kindness and jokes that drew blood. I work with numbers for a living. I know when a ledger is past due. I wasn't here to keep the easy peace. I was here to stop pretending. Daniel and I met through a mutual friend who thought we might balance each other out. He was knee-deep in graduate papers on public policy, and I was already working full-time in the finance office of a regional grocery chain. Back then, he looked at me with the kind of awe I mistook for respect. He would say things like, "You make me feel lazy, working all day while I just write memos." I believed him. I believed in us. When we moved into our first apartment, a narrow one-bedroom above a bakery in Hartford, I carried the heavier boxes and still managed a smile because Daniel promised things would get easier once his career took shape. I wanted to believe that too. The first time I met his parents, I wore a navy dress that I hoped looked professional without trying too hard. Walter shook my hand as though I were applying for credit I wouldn't qualify for. Marjorie let her eyes travel from my shoes to my hair before offering the faintest smile. "Oh," she said, "I imagined you'd be taller." Clara, his sister, perched on the arm of the sofa like a queen in waiting, chattered about her spa retreat while looking at me only once, to note, "I could never do what you do, work all day like that." Daniel laughed softly, trying to ease the sharpness in the air, but it clung anyway. That night, in the car, I told him it didn't feel like I'd been welcomed. He squeezed my hand and said, "They're just a little intense. Don't take it personally." So I didn't. Not at first. I showed up at holidays with bottles of wine they never opened. I complimented Marjorie's centerpieces, even as she raised her brows at the store-brand coffee I served when they visited us. I watched Clara unwrap tailored coats and imported perfumes while I held a candle that smelled faintly of mildew and wore a recycled gift tag. Each slight was small enough to swallow. What I didn't realize then was how quickly Daniel's defense of me would thin out, like paint washed by too many rains. He stopped noticing when his mother brought pastries for him alone. He stopped correcting his father's pitying remarks about my degree. I told myself love was worth the silence. But the silence was already eating us whole. Over the years, the small slights hardened into something sharper. Marjorie had a way of turning generosity into exclusion. She would stop by our apartment with glossy pastry boxes, pressing them into Daniel's hands while looking past me as though I were the doorman. If I poured her coffee, she wrinkled her nose at the brand and set the cup aside untouched. Walter wasn't much better. Once, when I left a pay stub on the counter, he picked it up without asking and murmured, "So little savings. No investments." He said it like a verdict, like I was already failing at a test no one had warned me about. Clara, meanwhile, lived in a world free of alarm clocks and deadlines. She bragged that she'd never worked a day in her life and didn't intend to. She draped herself in boutique clothes and talked about new yoga studios, all while eyeing me with practiced pity. "I could never do all that grunt work," she'd say, as though my job, steady, necessary, respectable, were something shameful. In the beginning, Daniel noticed, he would place a hand on my shoulder and tell them, "She works harder than anyone I know." He told me not to let their words stick. But gradually, his defenses wore down. He stopped hearing the way they spoke. He stopped noticing when his mother rifled through our drawers under the excuse of looking for napkins, pulling out my checkbook or credit card statements as if she had the right. I learned to stay composed, to smile through clenched teeth, to remind myself that marriage meant compromise. At family dinners, I cooked and cleaned, carried trays, and waited until everyone else was served before I filled my own plate. I thought if I kept showing up, if I kept proving myself useful, maybe one day they'd see me as more than the outsider who had married their son. But the more I gave, the less I seemed to matter. Even Daniel began to shrug when I pointed out the patterns. "That's just how they are," he said once, dismissing the ache in my chest as though it were a mosquito bite. I wanted to believe him, but each dismissal lodged deeper, and the cracks in our marriage began to show. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments, small humiliations that piled up until they were too heavy to ignore. The worst of them happened the summer Marjorie announced a family getaway to the lake. She called it our tradition, told me to pack warm clothes for cool nights, and said we'd leave early Saturday morning. I woke before dawn, folded sweaters into a duffel, and set a cooler by the door with snacks I thought would make the drive easier. Daniel seemed distracted, but I assumed it was stress. When we pulled into his parents' driveway, I ran inside to use the restroom. By the time I came out, the driveway was empty. Their SUV was gone. Daniel stood on the porch, his phone in his hand. "They left," he said flatly. I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean, they left?" "We came here to ride with them." He didn't meet my eyes. "Mom said it should be just family this year." The words knocked the air out of me. Just family. As though the marriage license we'd signed meant nothing. As though years of cooking, cleaning, and showing up with gifts had bought me no more than the title of a tenant in their son's life. I asked him how he could let them drive away without me. He only shrugged, as though it weren't his choice either, as though loyalty were a burden instead of a vow. We drove home in silence, the cooler of snacks untouched in the back seat. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the suitcase I'd packed with such hope. I realized that in their eyes, I would never belong. And what hurt more was that Daniel didn't fight it. His silence told me everything. He was comfortable letting me remain on the outside. From that weekend forward, something shifted in me. I still went to the gatherings, still plastered on a smile, but my heart no longer carried hope. I began to see our marriage for what it had become, a performance staged for everyone else, with me playing the role of someone who mattered. By the time the annual family luncheon rolled around that August, I already felt like a ghost haunting my own marriage. Still, when Marjorie called the night before, asking me to come early to help with preparations, I said yes. Old habits die hard. The morning of, I was up before the sun, chopping herbs and polishing glasses until my fingers smelled of lemon and steel. I ironed table linens while Daniel sipped espresso on the patio with his parents, his laughter drifting through the open door like a reminder of where I didn't belong. By the time Clara swept in, late and radiant, the kitchen was already humming. She poked her head in long enough to say, "Don't forget Aunt Caroline's vegan option," before vanishing again. When guests arrived, the house filled with the warmth of voices and perfume. I poured drinks, carried trays, and smiled until my cheeks ached. Only when every dish had been served did I allow myself to sit down, my back throbbing from the morning's work. That was when Marjorie stood. She held a tray high, her voice sweet with pride. A special surprise, just for family. Steam curled from 7 perfect fillets, glistening under the chandelier. She placed them carefully, one for Walter, one for Clara, one for Daniel, and the rest for the chosen few. When she passed me by, the air shifted. My plate held only a half-eaten piece of chicken from the earlier course. She wasn't finished. With a flourish, she revealed a white box tied with ribbon. "Imported tarts, flown in this morning." Applause fluttered around the table. Forks scraped, plates clinked. And still, nothing for me. It was Aunt Sharon who finally spoke. "Marjorie, didn't you prepare one for Esther?" Her voice was gentle, but the silence that followed was not. Marjorie's eyes flicked toward me as though I were a stain on the linen. "I only ordered for family," she said lightly. The words landed heavier than cutlery on porcelain. My chest burned, my ears roared, and when I turned to Daniel, I found him staring at his plate, sawing at his steak like it was all that mattered. "Am I family or not?" I asked, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He chewed slowly, deliberately, as though my question were nothing more than a rhetorical aside. The scrape of knives against porcelain faltered, and then silence spread like smoke through the dining room. "Don't do this here," he muttered without looking up. But I felt the tremor in my own hands, the years of quiet indignities rattling loose inside me. No, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. This is exactly the place. Marjorie gave a sharp laugh, brittle and dismissive. Honestly, Esther, to make a scene over food, it's beneath you. I looked at her squarely. This isn't about steak or desserts. It's about 7 years of being treated like I don't belong. Like I'm an intruder in my own marriage? Walter scoffed. No one ever said you weren't welcome. Maybe not in words, I answered. But you said it with every look, every whisper, every time you rifled through my things, as if I had to prove I was good enough. You said it when you left me behind at the lake house. Clara smirked. You're being dramatic. I turned to her. Dramatic. I've kept this household afloat while your brother's been lying about going to work. He hasn't held a job since last fall. Daniel's head snapped up, color draining from his face. Esther, stop! Or what? I pressed. You'll lose your precious image. Hate to break it to you, but everyone deserves to know the truth. The room stiffened. Walter's brows knit. Marjorie blinked, confused. What is she talking about? Daniel stammered, but no words came. I leaned forward, each syllable deliberate. He was fired from the city clerk's office after a massive error in the tax forms. Hundreds of families received wrong invoices, some underbilled by thousands. He was in charge of the final reviews. Aunt Sharon's voice trembled as she asked, Daniel, is that true? He shoved back his chair, shaking his head. This is insane. You're trying to humiliate me. I reached into my bag and placed a thin folder on the table. The sound was sharp, final. Draft separation papers, I said. I've already spoken with an attorney. Gasps circled the room. For the first time in years, Daniel finally looked at me, but not with love. With fear. The folder sat between us like a live wire. No one moved, not even Clara, whose fork hovered midair. The clatter of conversation had died so completely that I could hear the soft hum of the ceiling fan above. Aunt Sharon broke the stillness first. She set her napkin down and looked at me, then at Daniel. She's right to speak. Someone had to... Her voice carried the weight of disapproval not at me, but at them. Walter shifted in his chair, his face blotchy with anger. This is outrageous. Airing private matters at the table. Shameful. No, I answered, meeting his glare. What's shameful is pretending cruelty is tradition. What's shameful is 7 years of silence from the one person who vowed to stand beside me. Daniel reached for the folder as though he could make it disappear. You're overreacting. We can fix this. I pulled it back before he touched it. No, Daniel. I'm done waiting for you to choose me. Marjorie slammed her glass down, wine splashing over the rim. You don't speak to my son like that. And you don't get to treat me like I'm disposable, I shot back. My voice shaking, but sure. Around the table. Eyes darted nervously. A cousin coughed into his fist. 2 relatives stood, murmuring excuses as they slipped away. The carefully staged luncheon was unraveling, thread by thread. I pushed back my chair, the legs screeching against polished wood. I've given this family every chance to see me. All I ever got was silence. Today, I'm choosing not to be silent anymore. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my purse from the hook by the door, and returned just long enough to face the room one final time. You had 7 years to treat me like family, I said. My gaze lingered on Daniel, whose lips parted but formed no words. You chose silence. Now I choose myself. The room didn't erupt. It collapsed into a heavy, stunned quiet. And in that quiet, I turned and walked out, the August heat meeting me like a wall as the door clicked shut behind me. The drive home felt unreal, as though the air itself had thinned. For once, there were no footsteps chasing after me, no hurried apologies tossed into the silence, only the steady hum of my car and the knowledge that I had finally drawn a line no one could erase. That night, I carried my suitcase into the guest bedroom and closed the door. Daniel hovered in the hallway, his voice low, pleading. Esther, it was just one lunch. Don't throw everything away. But it wasn't just one lunch. It was every look, every insult, every moment he chose comfort over courage. I told him I needed space, and for the first time, I meant it. The days blurred into paperwork and long hours at my desk. I kept my lawyer updated, signed documents, and stored receipts to prove what I had carried while Daniel pretended to search for jobs. He stopped leaving the apartment. He stopped pretending altogether. Sometimes I heard him pacing the living room, muttering to himself, as if he couldn't quite believe I was serious. Meanwhile, my own life stretched forward. My company offered me a promotion, regional finance coordinator, with a salary bump and the option to work remotely. It was the kind of role I had dreamed about, and I accepted without hesitation. A new apartment, a new city, a new start waited for me just 3 months away. The mediation hearing came on a damp September morning. I wore a navy suit and kept my hair pulled back, carrying a folder thick with every bank statement I had covered during his unemployment. Daniel looked smaller than I remembered, his suit too tight, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. When it was over, when the judge confirmed what I had already decided, Daniel whispered, "I can't believe you're doing this to me." I stood, steady and unshaken. "No, Daniel. I can't believe you did this to me." I walked out of that courthouse alone, but lighter than I had in years. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. In the weeks that followed, the silence in my life changed its texture. It no longer felt like exile, but like space, room to breathe, to think, to finally hear my own voice again. I moved into a bright apartment 2 states away, with a balcony that caught the afternoon sun and a dishwasher that didn't rattle like old bones. My coworkers sent me plants, and the first evening I sat among them, watering each leaf. I realized I had built something that was mine alone. Marjorie sent an email once, laced with phrases like, "I'm sorry if you were hurt, and we all say things we don't mean." I archived it without replying. Regret offered in half measures isn't worth a response. Daniel called late one night, his voice worn thin. "I miss you," he said. "I should have stood up that day," I told him softly. "You had 7 years." There was nothing more to say. People think betrayal always comes with shouting, slammed doors, some violent break. But what undid me wasn't noise. It was Daniel's silence, his choice to look away, while I was carved out of his family piece by piece. That silence taught me more than their insults ever could. It taught me that love without loyalty is just performance, and peace without respect is only surrender. Walking away was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming the life I had almost forgotten was mine. Sometimes the strongest act of defiance is not to shout louder, but to refuse to sit quietly any longer. And in that refusal, I found myself again.